May I have your attention, please, to introduce the next speaker on the program. My name is Jack Molesworth. I'm the Massachusetts chairman of Young Americans for Freedom. And I consider it a distinct honor and privilege to be able to introduce the next two speakers. The next speaker is Frank McGehee, who has come all the way from deep in the heart of Texas, Dallas, Texas. He is the chairman of the National Indignation Convention, which, as most of you may recall, had its origin when our federal government was training Yugoslav pilots in the state of Texas. I will not take any of Mr. McGehee's time in further introduction. He will speak for himself. Thank you. Mr. McGehee.
I know you folks are all tired, and I'm going to try and do at least one thing here, and that is to get the speaking schedule back on schedule. John Rousselot and Ezra Taft Benson are tough fellows to follow if you're trying to make a speech. But I didn't come here to make a speech. You already have all of the information that you need. Most of the people in this country are up to their ears in information. What we need is a little more action and a little less talking. And specifically, I would recommend to the American people that they hold a little different form of Boston Tea Party. And that is that they remove from the Congress of the United States every man who calls himself a Democrat and every man who calls himself a Republican and voted for the Arms Control and Disarmament Act. That's what the people have got to do. Now, the thing that John Rousselot was bringing to you, I want to try and solidify that in your mind. Now, up here on the podium, I've got a mimeograph sheet that has on it the names of all of the government publications which pertain to the United States policy on arms control and disarmament, where they can be obtained, and how much they cost. Now, I'd like to pass those out to you right now. And for those in other parts of the building who may be able to hear this, these forms are available at the National Indignation Convention booth back in the other wing. Just go by there and pick them up. Another form that's here on the table is a brief resume of various aspects of the policy which John discussed with you. Another form has on it a detailed program for grassroots local action to do something about the disarmament program. And so if I could, I'd like to just stop for a minute and pass these out among the people who are here. If someone just give me a hand. There are just 3 different forms. Ladies and gentlemen, in connection with the voting on the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency, you people in Massachusetts should know that every United States representative from the state of Massachusetts voted in favor of it. Every one. There were 290 United States representatives who voted in favor of surrendering the military power of the United States to the UN. And there were 73 out of 100 senators who voted in favor of it. I want to show you physically the documents to which John Rousselot alluded. First of all, this is the Freedom from War document. This contains the State Department policy that he referred to. Second of all, this is the copy of the law which your Congress passed. And this was signed into law in September of 1961. Next came the blueprint for the peace race, which is almost word for word, with technical expansion of various phrases, this document. This one here, the Blueprint for the Peace Race, is a technical expansion of this one and sets forth specifically every word that Mr. Rousselot was talking about. Another publication is Disarmament, the U.S. Initiative. If you think these boys don't meet it, just read their own words. This is a copy of a speech by President Kennedy, and this is another publication which has to do with the economic impacts of disarmament. Every one of the things that John Rousselot was speaking of are in effect right now. They are going full bore to do it. Now, as I said, I am not here to try and make a public speech. I simply want to emphasize in your minds several things. First of all, you heard today Mr. Alec Rourke discuss the deplorable situation in Cuba. You heard Mr. Ezra Taft Benson's eloquent reference to that situation and the infamy of it. However, what can be done about it? Ladies and gentlemen, if we had a Congress of the United States that had any guts, there would not be any situation in Cuba right now. And how can that come about? It can only come about by the implementation of the exhortation that John Rousselot made to you, that you base your stand on morality and you stay with it until such time as the people from Massachusetts have sent to the national legislature men who are dedicated to stand up and use the spiritual and physical strength of this country to protect our freedoms and to liberate the other peoples of the world. That's the only peaceful way to effect a political change, is at the polls. And the situation in Cuba could be altered overnight. With respect to the Liberty Amendment that we have discussed here today, if there were in our Congress men who would go back to their congressional districts and explain to their constituency the evils of the federal income tax and how that tax could be supplanted by other forms of revenue-raising projects, then you could have ratification so that the 16th Amendment would be thrown out. The point I'm trying to make is that if you truly want a solution, if you want a solution to the problems that are facing you, there is one common solution. And that is the placing in the United States House and the United States Senate men who understand what is wrong and understand exactly what to do about it and have got the courage to do it. And any other kind of talk, all I'm saying is resolves itself down to this one point. Now, people have come to the conclusion in their own hearts that political action is impossible. Ladies and gentlemen, I simply submit to you, what other kind of peaceful action is there? Can anyone answer that question? What other kind of peaceful action is available for effecting political change? There isn't any. Therefore, if you subscribe to the proposition that peaceful political action is not obtainable, then you are admitting defeat. You are admitting defeat. It is possible. Now, it has to have a plan. It has to have a plan of action, And that is what the people in many parts of this country are working on right now. Right now. In other words, on the one hand, an analysis of the political atmosphere in the 50 states. And on the other hand, an analysis of the legal atmosphere in the 50 states. An analysis of the election codes. Why? Because there are many people in my hometown who can give to you all of the ramifications of the communist conspiracy. They can give to you the complete catalog of all the subversives in the United States, but they cannot tell you the name and address of their precinct chairman. They can't tell you their congressional district number, and they don't know what a United States representative is. This is what I'm trying to point out. They do not know, with all of their knowledge of the international communist conspiracy, they do not know the fundamental operation of their own political party. And yet they wonder why things are the way they are. Why is it that in 1964, the attempt is going to be made anyhow to give you that glorious alternative between John F. Kennedy and John D. Rockefeller? And no wonder the people get discouraged. They never have anybody to vote for. Why? Because they do not control their own political party machinery. That's why. Why is it that you always have the lesser of two evils instead of somebody to vote for? This is why. Now, to go just a little bit farther in this thing, in order to find out how to gain control of the political party in your state, you've got to analyze the election laws of that state. Now, the analysis that I am talking about is aimed toward one objective: limitation of the objective, limitation of the job. So that here is the thing, with these two criteria, you are going to make the decision that in these states it is legally impossible to effect political change, or in these states it is politically impossible to effect political change. I can tell you this, that the preliminary results of this investigation result in 33 states in which it is legally and politically possible to take control of both the Republican and the Democratic Party at the precinct level. And it does not, I'm sorry to say, include Massachusetts. It does not include New York. It does not include California. It does not include Illinois or Pennsylvania or New Jersey. But there are 33 states in this country in which this is possible. At least the results of the preliminary investigation so indicate. And that is going to be the battleground if the political analysis of it says that this is the cold fact. This is the cold political fact that if in these 33 states you gain control of both the Republican and Democratic Party at the precinct level, that neither John D. Rockefeller or John F. Kennedy will be able to get the nomination in 1964. That is the objective. And it also involves the congressional races. It also involves the congressional races. A determination will be made as to what districts it is physically, from a political standpoint, and legally possible to change the status quo. And this is where you, Mr. John Q. Citizen, comes in. This is your job. If it is that in the state of Massachusetts you cannot change all of the congressmen, or you cannot gain control of the political party, there are at least several congressional districts in your state that you could concentrate on, and in those districts elect strong patriotic American congressmen. And those congressmen would give you that very rosy picture that Mr. Kent Courtney put before you in his report. But ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you with all of the strength and all of the sincerity that's in my heart that unless this job is done at the precinct level in your own backyard, you will never see the rosy picture that Mr. Courtney presented in his little speech, but rather you will see in this country the implementation of the same methods that have been employed in every socialist, communist country in the world. And there is what you must do. You must go into your own precincts and work there. Work there. Now there is going to be a great deal of argument as to whether or not you should work within the framework of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or start a new party. I am not going to posit one position or the other, but there are certain pitfalls along these roads, and you should be cognizant of them. You have got to analyze the election laws of your state and find work on a third party. By that I'm saying, if it is legally and politically possible, after the result of a study, to recapture control of both of your parties or one of them in your state, then work within that framework because it will be just that much easier. If the result of the analysis is, please do not just prejudge it. Get the facts, make your analysis, and then make your decision as to whether or not a third party, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, is the vehicle in my state. Now, with respect to the plan of political battle that we were gained to start a third party, the preliminary result or analysis of their election laws and their political climate is that the best vehicle is through the Democratic and Republican Party in those states. Now, I only have a few more minutes, and I'd like to be as specific as possible. An astute politician will tell you that one vote in a precinct or a ward is worth 1,000 votes in a general election. Now, why is that? Why is that? First of all, let's just take one little precinct down in my own home state. Now, this precinct has a certain Jew who, lived there? Who paid a poll tax there. Neither political party in my home state knows how many qualified voters live in the precinct. In other words, qualified in all respect except paying the poll tax. So, there's the first thing. Their Democratic Party, let's say. Now, they're going to have a convention in 1964, a county Democratic convention. Now, how many delegates are going to be allowed to come to that county precinct convention from the precinct in question? That is going to be determined for the Democratic candidate for governor in the general election of 1962. This precinct is going to be able to send one delegate to the county convention. Now, the particular precinct in question on this, using this formula, is allocated 28 delegates to the county convention. Now, this was found out in this precinct how many people ordinarily come to the precinct meeting. How many people come there to participate? And they found out that it was only a very, very few, 8 or 10. That's the most that ever came. But keep in mind that this precinct, on an average, sent about 28 delegates to the county convention, but only 8 or 10 people ever came to the precinct meeting. So these men went out and they selected a slate of delegates, 28 men and women that they talked to personally and used as a basis used as a basis of the decision as to whether or not to ask men will stand up. All right? The list was made up. They figured that they had to have 15 people to control the precinct, so they took 30 to the precinct meeting. The first order of business at the precinct meeting was to adopt the unit rule, which, as most of you may know, is that once man number one was nominated and elected, all 27 other men on that slate were elected as delegates also. That was the first order of business at the precinct. And keep in mind that at the time this was going on, there was an adverse precinct chairman. The unit rule was adopted. And then this friend of mine got up, a fellow that I flew with over in Korea, and he doesn't like to do much talking. He just likes to get out and have it out. He stood up and said, "I nominate Joe Blow for the office of delegate to the county convention." The guy standing right next to him jumped up and he said, "I second the motion." The next fellow got up and he said, "I move the nomination cease." The next guy got up and said, "I second the motion." They took a vote on it, and that was that. And 28 delegates went to the Democratic County Convention, and every one of them were conservative. It took 15 seconds in the precinct meeting to do it. Now, the thing is that when they got there, they found out that the same thing had taken place in other Democratic precincts. We're not talking about the Republicans at all. On the converse side, as far as the elections went in my own home county, we re-elected Congressman Bruce Alger, one of the most conservative congressmen in the House, and all of the Republican candidates who were running on a conservative ticket who went for office were elected. Every one of them. Every one. But we're talking about the Democratic side where you're not supposed to be able to make any inroads. And when they got to the county convention, there at the county convention, the same thing had been done in enough other precincts in that county that they controlled the Democratic County Convention in Dallas County. And they determined the policies of that convention, and they determined the people who were going to go to the state conventions. And the thing that you must keep in mind is that these state conventions, it is at the state conventions in most of your states at which the electors are selected or nominated for that office. The office of elector in most of the states of this country, the office of elector, the people who are nominated for that office, that is determined at the state convention of the political party. And by the same token, it is the state convention of the political party who determines the people who will go to the delegates of the National Democratic and Republican nominating conventions. And this is exactly what I am trying to say. By gaining control of both parties at the precinct level, or the grassroots level, if you will, in a sufficient number of states, and excluding those states in which it is impossible to fight, you would still be able to block the nomination of either John F. Kennedy or John D. Rockefeller at the nominating conventions in or it has serious ramifications with respect to the makeup of the Congress. And ladies and gentlemen, really and truly, that's about all that I have to say. I just want to encourage you to please do the one thing that has to be done. And it's a dirty job. It is absolutely free of all glamour. It's nothing but hard work. Mailing letters, licking postage stamps, turning a mimeograph machine, knocking on the doors, and so forth. And nobody will ever know that you're out there doing it. But when the whole thing is done, you will have in your National Congress the men that you want to give you the results that Mr. Courtney was describing in a report 2 years hence after 1964. That is what has got to be done if we are going to effect peaceful political change in this country and preserve the heritage of this country for our children. Please just ask God to help you and do everything you can in your own community, your own ward, your own precinct, to make the people aware of what has to be done. Now, there's about 5 minutes until the next speaker is supposed to come, and I personally would like to answer any questions that you might have, if that's all right, sir. Yes, sir.
Maybe seem a little bit digressive, but do you know anything about the statistics as to the number of people that are elected to office who they do have integrity, but in the plays of compromise, they fall by the wayside, and so a lot of the politicians fall down, and the ones that we elect do not measure up. How about
Yes, sir.
that?
All right. From a statistical point of view, sir, I don't like to use the word impossible, but I don't know how you would gather those statistics, is what I'm trying to say. But I do know this. In April of 1962, I was in Washington to testify before the House Foreign Affairs Committee. The night before I got there, the man who just left this stage was speaking in the House of Representatives of the United States on the very subject that he was talking to you about, trying to awaken his other fellow members as to what was going on. And do you know what was happening in the House of Representatives? They were making fun of the fact that John Rousseau has a physical infirmity on the floor of the House. And when Congressman Jimmy Utt from California got up to do the same thing, they paraded back and forth in front of him with earmuffs on. This is in your House of Representatives. And to say one other thing on this point, you heard Congressman Rousseau heavily emphasize, it was Bob Welch, who said that Congressman Rousseau makes his decisions on one basis. Now, in February, we were in Washington again in connection with certain legislation there, and I heard a United States representative say on the floor of the House, and they were discussing the urban renewal affair, it does not make any difference whether this legislation is. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't believe what I'm saying, I suggest you get on a boat or a bus or an airplane or a train and go down there to Washington and sit in the Senate and in the House and watch them. I guarantee you will see something that will revulse you beyond anything that the communists have ever done. It is a national disgrace. It is a national disgrace. They sell out for any reason. And I'll tell you another thing that is going on there. Let's suppose that this gentleman right here is the congressman from a particular district, and he is going to try and walk along the line that the administration wants him to walk on. I'm not just talking about this administration either, ladies and gentlemen. There isn't anything going on in this administration that wasn't started 30 years ago. The only thing is that they're implementing the fruits of 30 years of work. But anyway, he's going to walk their line. And then another group of citizens back in his home district go back and they say, we're going to put this man out of office. Then they come to him and they say, don't you worry about that. Let those constituents back there kick you out of office if they so desire. You vote the way we tell you to vote. And if they kick you out, we'll give you an appointment. And that's the way they relieve the pressure from back home. You've got to put men up there who will stand up and who will look them in the eye and damn their treacherous flatteries. That's what you've got to do. And they'll use every trick in the book, from personal intimidation and blackmail to threats, to get them to do what they want them to do. Are there any other questions? I see that, I think, Mr. Stone, you're next, are you not, sir? And I don't want to get into his time because I know he has a lot to say. I have about 1 minute of 6. Is there anybody else that would like to ask any questions at all? Just one more then. Yes, sir. All right. That can be answered in one short sentence. When I leave here, we're going out to Montana and to several other of the western states. And before this trip is over, I'm going to know whether or not there's going to be the money available, not only to draw up this plan of battle for our states, but also the money available to begin the implementation of it. And I will know in another 8 days, and I would certainly hope that each one of you will pray that the financial support will be available so that the plan of political battle can be laid right now and the implementation begun right now, so that in 1964, when the general election are over, it will be total victory for us and the end of communist socialist power in the world. Thank you.
In line with Mr. McGehee's comments pertinent to the situation in the state of Massachusetts, I would like to make a gratuitous suggestion to all of you who would like to take some of the political action which he was recommending. There will be, as the first vote in the Congress that convenes on Wednesday in Washington, the question of increasing the number of the House Rules Committee from 12 to 15. This will doubtlessly be the most important vote in the entire House of Representatives in the next 2 years. It so happens that 4 of the 5 Republican representatives from Massachusetts were with the Kennedy administration on this issue 2 years ago. Congressmen Bates, Conte, and Morse voted with the Kennedy administration to increase the membership in the Rules Committee and give the administration control over it. Congressman Martin was paired for this measure. Only Congressman Keefe and now retired Congressman Curtis voted against this. The best thing you could do to implement the suggestions of Mr. McGehee is, as soon as you get home, to write a letter to all 5 of those Republican congressmen. The Democrats on this issue are unfortunately hopeless. Let them know that you do not want the Kennedy administration to have control of the Rules Committee this coming session of Congress, and urge them to vote against its expansion. If you want additional information on the issue, on the Young Americans for Freedom booth in the Georgian Room, the front right corner of the booth is one sheet which gives all the details on this issue. If you want to take some political action, this is your chance to do it.